For 20 years, our home had been a symphony of quiet joys. The morning clatter of coffee mugs, the easy banter across the dinner table, the hum of life unfolding in a space built on shared dreams and unwavering devotion. Garrett, with his charming smile and steady gaze, was the conductor of this orchestra. Or so I believed. We'd met in college, two young souls convinced of a lifelong connection, and our life together had blossomed into something I often thought belonged in a magazine. Our children, Audrey and Spencer, were the vibrant notes in our melody, thriving under what I'd always considered a truly loving and stable roof. Our sprawling suburban house, with its manicured garden and sun-drenched kitchen, wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the physical manifestation of our perfect life, a testament to 2 decades of commitment, loyalty, and what I'd always taken for granted as an unbreakable bond. Every anniversary, every shared glance over a quiet dinner, reinforced the narrative. We were the lucky ones, the couple who had truly made it. That narrative shattered on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting our living room in hues of fading gold. Garrett sat opposite me, nursing a scotch, his expression unnervingly calm. "Bev," he began, his voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "We need to talk about our future. Our time's evolution, asterisk." My brows furrowed slightly. Evolution? We were happy. What needed evolving? Then, the words that would carve an indelible scar into the landscape of my life tumbled out, delivered with a casualness that made my blood run cold. "I think it's time we considered an open marriage, a chance to explore our individual desires, while still maintaining our core connection." My heart stuttered, then raced. An open marriage? The concept felt alien. A crude joke whispered in the sanctity of our shared space. Before I could even formulate a coherent thought, before the initial shock had even fully registered, he added the fatal blow. A detail that twisted the knife deep into my unsuspecting soul. "And Phoebe will be moving in next week. She's excited about this new arrangement." Phoebe, my stepsister, the girl I'd watched grow up, the one I'd welcomed into our family when my father married her mother, the girl I'd thought of as a younger sibling, albeit one with whom I'd always maintained a polite distance. My mind reeled, grasping for purchase in the sudden vacuum of reality. This couldn't be happening. Not Garrett. Not my Garrett. Not with Phoebe. A visceral wave of nausea washed over me, churning the expensive dinner I'd just prepared. My vision blurred, the familiar lines of our living room melting into a chaotic swirl of betrayal and disbelief. The man sitting across from me, the man I'd loved, honored, and trusted implicitly for 2 decades, was suddenly a stranger, a cruel imposter wearing my husband's face. Every memory, every tender touch, every whispered promise of forever, now felt like a meticulously crafted lie, the foundation of my entire existence crumbling into dust around me. The silence in the room screamed, filled with the deafening sound of my world collapsing. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the polished floor, the sound jarring in the sudden heavy stillness. "No," I managed, my voice a ragged whisper that quickly firmed into something sharper. "Absolutely not, Garrett. This isn't an evolution. This is a perversion, and it's not happening." My denial hung in the air, heavy and absolute, a direct challenge to his unsettling calm. His placid facade cracked, replaced by a flicker of cold anger I'd rarely seen, certainly never directed at me with such intensity. "Bev, be reasonable," he said, his voice dropping, but laced with an undeniable menace. "I'm offering you a way to keep our life intact, to keep our family together. Think of the children, think of everything we've built." He leaned forward, his gaze hardening. "If you try to fight me on this, if you even think times about divorce, I will make sure you walk away with nothing. No house, no savings, no reputation. The children will choose me. You'll be alone, destitute, do you understand?" The threat, instead of paralyzing me, ignited a cold, hard resolve deep within my gut. Destitute? Alone? I would see about that. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, I was in my car, driving to the first lawyer on a list I'd frantically searched online, my hand trembling as I clutched the steering wheel. The lawyer, a formidable woman with kind eyes and a sharp mind, listened patiently. Her advice was grim but clear. Document everything. Secure assets. Prepare for war. The feeling of profound isolation was immediate and crushing, even with her reassuring words echoing in the sterile office. It was just me, no one else. The 20 years of shared life, shared dreams, suddenly felt like a carefully constructed illusion I had built entirely on my own. I spent the next few days moving with a strange, detached efficiency. Joint accounts were emptied, credit cards were canceled, investments discreetly transferred to a new, separate account. Each click of the mouse, each confirmation email, felt like a silent act of rebellion, a small chip at the colossal monument of his deceit. I knew the storm that would follow, the righteous fury of a man who believed himself untouchable. But I needed to build my ark first. My lawyer had warned me about the speed and ruthlessness with which men like Garrett could move. I intended to be one step ahead. The inevitable explosion came on Friday afternoon, precisely as I knew it would. Garrett burst through the front door, his face a mask of purple rage, a vein throbbing visibly in his temple. "What have you times done, asterisk?" he roared, throwing his briefcase onto the hall table with a crash that rattled the framed photos of our smiling children. "My cards are declined, the accounts are empty. Are you insane, Beverly?" His words were venom, spitting hatred I'd never seen directed at me. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I stood my ground in the living room, a new, fragile strength blossoming within me. "I'm protecting myself, Garrett, something you clearly never intended to do for me." That night, after he'd retreated to the guest bedroom, muttering threats under his breath about the coming legal battle, I walked into our master bedroom. It no longer felt like ours. It was a battleground, a tomb of dead promises. With a chilling calm, I began to pack his things, his suits, his ties, the books on his nightstand, his cologne. Each item was carefully placed in moving boxes, then carried out, one by one, to the guest room. I didn't say a word, didn't make a sound, letting only the soft rustle of fabric and cardboard fill the silence. It was a silent, deliberate act of reclaiming my space, drawing the first definitive line in the sand. The air in the room, once thick with shared intimacy, was now thin and cold, filled only with the faint scent of betrayal and the quiet whisper of a war that had just begun. The silence that followed Garrett's banishment to the guest room was not one of peace, but of a precarious truce, soon to be shattered by the cacophony of judgment. I braced myself, knowing the storm was coming, but I was utterly unprepared for its true origin. The first call came from my mother, her voice tinged with a carefully modulated disappointment that stung more than outright anger. "Beverly, dear, I just spoke with Garrett. He says you're being unreasonable. An open marriage is certainly unconventional, but for the sake of the children, for the family, couldn't you try to work through this? Phoebe is practically family after all." The words hung in the air, a sickening twist of betrayal. My own mother, whose arms I'd always run to for solace, was now echoing Garrett's manipulative rhetoric, framing me as the aggressor, the one destroying our family. It was as if I'd become invisible, my pain and dignity dismissed in favor of maintaining a facade. My father, usually quiet, offered a terse, "Just try to keep things civil, Bev. Don't make a scene." The subtext was clear. My heartbreak was an inconvenience, my desire for faithfulness an unreasonable demand. My in-laws, predictably, were far less subtle. Garrett's mother called, her tone sharp and accusatory. "What have you done to my son? He tells me you've drained the accounts, thrown him out of his own bedroom. After all he's done for you, Beverly? You're a cold, ungrateful woman." Each call, each text, each thinly veiled remark from friends who had suddenly developed an inexplicable loyalty to Garrett, hammered home the agonizing truth. I was on my own, My world, once so expansive and secure, had shrunk to the four walls of my increasingly lonely home. A fortress under siege. But the deepest cuts came from within. Audrey, my vibrant, sensitive daughter, started responding to my calls with clipped, distant answers. Spencer, my thoughtful son, stopped calling altogether. Garrett, ever the master manipulator, had evidently begun his campaign. I could almost hear his soothing, rational voice in my mind, twisting the narrative, painting me as erratic, unstable, the one who had recklessly destroyed our happy home. He would have told them I was the one who refused to compromise, who selfishly chose to tear the family apart. One evening, after I'd left a message for Audrey that went unanswered, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice hushed. "Dad says Mom is just going through a phase. She's been acting really strange. Aggressive even. I don't know what to believe." The receiver clattered as I dropped the dish I was washing. It shattered, mirroring the pieces of my heart. She hadn't seen my pain, only the version of events her father had carefully constructed, the betrayal from my own children. Born from my body, raised with my love, was a raw, gaping wound that refused to heal. The house, once filled with the comfortable chaos of family life, became an echo chamber of my solitude. Garrett continued to live in the guest room, a phantom presence, his disdain palpable in the strained silence at the dinner table where he and Phoebe would occasionally sit, pretending I wasn't there. Phoebe, with her wide, innocent eyes and feigned concern, would often offer me small, backhanded compliments, always with a saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Beverly, you're looking a little tired. All this stress must be taking a toll." Each word was a tiny barb, designed to poke and prod, to chip away at my resolve. I learned to keep my gaze steady, my expression neutral, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. The official summons for the divorce proceedings arrived in a thick envelope, its legal jargon chillingly formal. It was no longer a silent war of wills within our home. It was a public declaration, a brutal, drawn-out battle that would be fought in the cold, unfeeling arena of the courts. My lawyer, Miss Davies, met my gaze across her large, polished desk. "This will be difficult, Beverly. Garrett has deep pockets and a strong desire to make an example of you. He'll use everything he can against you. But we're prepared." Her words, meant to reassure, only underscored the immense, lonely mountain I had to climb. I was fighting not just for my financial future, but for my very identity, my sanity, against a man who had once sworn to protect me, and a family who had turned their backs. The battle had truly begun, and I was stepping onto the field of combat, utterly alone. The battlefield wasn't paved with dirt and blood, but with polished marble and the cold, unyielding language of the law. Each court appearance, each document filed, each carefully worded deposition felt like a grueling skirmish. Garrett, true to his word, had unleashed an arsenal of legal tactics, not to resolve the marriage, but to dismantle me piece by piece. His lawyer, a sharp-suited shark with eyes as devoid of warmth as Garrett's had become, painted me as an unstable, financially irresponsible woman who had abandoned her family for a fit of irrational rage. They argued that my swift actions to secure funds were not protection, but an impulsive attempt to embezzle marital assets. My meticulous planning, once a source of quiet pride, was twisted into evidence of calculated malice. Miss Davies, my lawyer, fought valiantly, her voice cutting through the thinly veiled misogyny that often tinged Garrett's arguments. She presented the evidence of his infidelity, his threats, the timeline of his proposition and my subsequent actions, but the courts, I quickly learned, valued precedent and perception over raw, messy truth. Garrett's carefully constructed image as a respected businessman, a pillar of the community, held sway. He testified with a practiced mournfulness, lamenting my unilateral decision to destroy our family, portraying himself as the injured party, forced to defend his children and his livelihood against my sudden, inexplicable hostility. The children, still under his pervasive influence, were used as pawns. Their reluctance to speak to me, their confused loyalty, was subtly paraded before the judge as proof of my emotional instability and their need for a stable paternal presence. The financial blows were particularly brutal. Despite Miss Davy's best efforts, the judge, influenced by Garrett's narrative and the expertly crafted financial disclosures that minimized his true worth while inflating mine, ruled against me on several key points. The house, our beautiful sun-drenched home, was awarded to Garrett, deemed essential for providing a stable environment for the children. I was ordered to pay a significant sum in spousal support alimony to him, ostensibly to compensate for the emotional distress and financial disruption my reckless actions had caused him. The irony was a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. The man who had betrayed me, who had threatened to leave me with nothing, was now legally entitled to a portion of my meager hard-won savings. I left the courtroom after that ruling, the weight of the injustice pressing down on me, my vision swimming with unshed tears. It felt like I was being punished for his crimes, crucified for daring to defend myself. The public perception Garrett had so meticulously orchestrated began to seep into every corner of my life. Whispers followed me in the grocery store aisles. Friends, or rather, acquaintances who had once shared laughter and confidences, now averted their eyes or offered terse, sympathetic glances that felt more like pity than genuine concern. The local women's groups I'd been a part of for years suddenly stopped sending invitations. I became a pariah, the angry, bitter woman who had destroyed her own family, while Garrett, with Phoebe by his side, continued to play the role of the wounded but resilient father, bravely navigating a difficult situation. There were moments, many of them, when the sheer exhaustion threatened to engulf me. Days blurred into a haze of legal documents, phone calls with Miss Davies, and the crushing loneliness that pressed in from all sides. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I had made a terrible mistake, that I should have just endured his perversion to keep my home, my children, my reputation. But then, a memory would surface. Garrett's cold eyes as he delivered his ultimatum, Phoebe's saccharine smile, the chilling emptiness of his threat, and a flicker, small but persistent, of that cold, hard resolve would ignite within me again. This wasn't just about money or a house, it was about reclaiming myself, proving that I was more than just Garrett's wife, more than a collateral casualty of his ego. The legal battle was a war I was losing on paper, but I refused to lose myself in the process. Each setback, each unjust ruling, chipped away at my resources, but it also solidified a steely determination. They could take my house, my money, even try to take my dignity, but they would not break my spirit. Not entirely. The last box was heavier than it looked, filled with remnants of a life that no longer existed. I wrestled it through the narrow doorway of my new apartment, the chipped paint on the frame a stark contrast to the gleaming oak of my former home. This wasn't a house. It was a unit, small and cramped, on the second floor of a sprawling complex that hummed with the anonymous lives of strangers. The air inside felt stale, infused with the faint scent of old carpet and desperation. I set the box down with a thud, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence, and surveyed my new domain, a tiny living area that doubled as a dining nook, a microscopic kitchen, and a single bedroom barely large enough for a queen-sized bed. This was all I had left. After 2 decades of building an empire of comfort and security, the despair was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I would stand in the middle of the empty rooms, the boxes still largely unpacked, and just stare at the unfamiliar walls, at the beige carpet that seemed to absorb all light, at the small, lonely window overlooking a parking lot. Every morning, I woke with a jolt of anxiety, the reality of my financial precariousness, a constant, gnawing worry. My hard-won savings were dwindling rapidly, devoured by legal fees and the absurd alimony I was forced to pay Garrett. There were days I could barely bring myself to eat, the lump in my throat too large for food to pass. I felt like a ghost, haunting the ruins of a life I'd once loved, unable to connect with the woman I was supposed to be now. The silence, once a comfort, became a torment, amplifying the echoes of Garrett's threats and my children's hurtful distance. One particularly gray afternoon, feeling utterly adrift, I stumbled upon a flyer for a community pottery class. It was tucked away on a corkboard at the local library, almost an afterthought. Beginner's wheel throwing. Tuesdays and Thursdays. An idle curiosity, a desperate need for distraction, nudged me. I had always admired handmade ceramics, the tactile beauty of clay shaped by human hands, but had never dared to try it myself. Always too busy with the demands of my perfect life. Now, with no demands, and a void to fill, I signed up. The first class was awkward. My hands, accustomed to the delicate precision of cooking and gardening, felt clumsy and resistant. The clay wobbled on the wheel, collapsing into shapeless mounds, mirroring the chaos I felt inside. I left that first session feeling more frustrated than ever, covered in mud, but something had shifted. A tiny flicker of focus had pulled me away from the endless loop of rumination. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the pottery studio became my sanctuary. The rhythmic whir of the wheel, the cool, pliable earth beneath my fingers, the intense concentration required to center the clay, it all demanded a presence I hadn't felt in months. Each failed attempt, each crooked bowl or lopsided mug, was a lesson in letting go, in starting over. And then, one day, something magical happened. The clay listened. My hands, guided by instinct and repetition, found a rhythm. A graceful, symmetrical cylinder rose from the spinning earth. A perfect vessel. A gasp escaped my lips. A small, triumphant sound. It wasn't perfect. Not yet. But it was times mine. I had created something beautiful. Something from nothing. With only my own hands and resolve. That simple, fragile success in the pottery studio was the first crack in the concrete wall of my despair. It wasn't about the pot. It was about the act of creation. The proof that I was still capable of producing something worthwhile. The studio became a space where Beverly, the wife, the mother, the betrayed woman, receded, and Beverly, the artist, the maker, began to emerge. I started to look forward to my classes, the sense of purpose they gave me. I began experimenting with glazes, with different forms, my apartment slowly filling with my imperfect, but deeply personal, creations. These pieces, each with its own story of effort and small triumphs, were tangible evidence of my burgeoning resilience. They were a quiet declaration. I was still here. I was rebuilding, and I was not entirely broken. The quiet triumph of a perfectly glazed pot wasn't just about clay. It was a subtle shift in the tectonic plates of my soul. It signaled an opening, a willingness to look beyond the immediate despair, to see possibilities where only ruin had been before. The small apartment, once a painful reminder of everything I'd lost, slowly transformed. I began to paint the beige walls, choosing soft blues and warm creams that reflected the gentle hues of the sunrise. I now made a point to watch. My pottery, initially relegated to corners, found pride of place, each piece a silent testament to my survival. I started venturing out more, not with a forced optimism, but with a quiet, growing curiosity about the world beyond my immediate grief. A local community garden offered another outlet, and soon I was coaxing life from the soil, finding parallels between the resilient sprouts and my own tentative growth. One Saturday, browsing a local farmer's market, my eyes caught a display of intricate wooden sculptures. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each piece imbued with a quiet strength. Behind the stall stood a man with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. His hands, dusted with sawdust, moving gracefully as he spoke to a customer. He wasn't overtly handsome, but there was an honesty in his gaze, a calm presence that instantly put me at ease. His son, a boy who looked to be about 8 or 9, was meticulously arranging small, hand-carved animals on a nearby table. His brow furrowed in concentration. "Beautiful work," I said, gesturing to a swirling abstract piece. He looked up, his smile widening. "Thank you. I'm Russell. And this is my assistant, Leo." He gestured to the boy, who offered a shy wave. "Beverly," I replied, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. We talked about art, about the joys of working with one's hands, about the simple satisfaction of creation. Russell didn't pry, didn't ask about my past, and I found myself relaxing into his easy conversation, a welcome relief from the guarded interactions I'd grown used to. Leo, too, seemed to sense my comfort, eventually joining our conversation, proudly explaining the intricate details of a carved badger. It was a simple encounter, yet it left a warmth lingering in my chest long after I'd left with a small wooden bird in my bag. Our paths crossed again, at the Pottery Studio's biannual exhibition where I was nervously displaying my first few pieces. Russell was there, admiring the work, and his genuine enthusiasm for my ceramics was a balm to my fragile ego. We started meeting for coffee, then for walks in the park. With each conversation, I found myself slowly, tentatively, opening up. I didn't rush into sharing the ugly details of my divorce, but piece by piece, he listened without judgment, offering not pity, but understanding, and a quiet, steady strength. He had been through his own share of heartbreak. A quiet divorce that had left him with sole custody of Leo, a pain he carried with grace. His resilience resonated with mine, creating an unexpected deep connection. Leo, with his bright, curious eyes and gentle spirit, was the key to my heart. He would often join us for walks, his small hand instinctively finding mine as we navigated uneven paths. He loved to hear about my pottery, his questions insightful and innocent. One afternoon, while Russell was inside a store, Leo and I sat on a bench, sharing an ice cream. "My dad says you make really pretty bowls," he said, licking chocolate from his chin. "Do you think you could teach me sometime?" His genuine interest, his uncomplicated affection, melted away years of ice around my heart. He wasn't judging me, he just saw me, Beverly, a woman who made pretty bowls and liked ice cream. Russell and Leo weren't just a new love. They were an entirely new paradigm of family. Our evenings were filled with shared meals, laughter, and the simple, comfortable rhythm of a truly supportive home. We built a new garden together, my once solitary hobby transformed into a collective joy. Leo would help me with my pottery, his small hands carefully smoothing the clay, his enthusiasm infectious. It was a stark contrast to the performative perfection of my life with Garrett, where love felt conditional, and happiness was a facade. With Russell, there was an unspoken understanding, a shared commitment to kindness and authenticity. He saw my scars and helped me heal, not by ignoring them, but by embracing them as part of my story. He and Leo taught me that trust could be rebuilt, that love could be found again, and that the most profound happiness wasn't in grand gestures or societal expectations, but in the quiet, everyday moments of genuine connection, acceptance, and belonging. I was no longer just rebuilding, I was flourishing. And then there was Phoebe. I would occasionally see her and Garrett out in public, usually at the same places we used to frequent. The upscale grocery store, a favorite restaurant. Their public displays of affection, once so brazenly defiant, had given way to a strained tension. Phoebe, whose youthful vibrancy had once seemed inexhaustible, now often looked drawn and tired. Her once impeccable outfits seemed a little less put together, her forced smiles a little more fragile. One afternoon, while picking up groceries, I saw them exiting a restaurant. Their usual performative cheer was absent. Phoebe's face was etched with something akin to exasperation, her eyes darting nervously, and Garrett's jaw was tight, his hand gripping her arm almost possessively as he steered her towards their car. He seemed to be lecturing her, his words low and sharp, and she flinched, pulling away slightly. The casual indifference I had towards them was pierced by a fleeting observation. The illusion they once projected was definitely cracking. The woman who had reveled in her role as the other woman, basking in Garrett's attention and the perceived glory of her conquest, now seemed to be enduring the very man she had so eagerly stolen. His charm, I realized, was probably only charming when it was directed at someone new. Someone he hadn't yet tried to control or diminish. I heard through the grapevine that Phoebe had wanted children, a large family. Something Garrett had always claimed to want but never truly prioritized. Now, with his business faltering and his public image tarnished, the grand life she had envisioned seemed to be slipping through her fingers. Her dreams, it seemed, were just as conditional as his love. The whispered rumors spoke of arguments, of Phoebe's growing dissatisfaction with Garrett's increasing stinginess and controlling nature. The lavish gifts had stopped, replaced by financial constraints and constant criticism. She was no longer the adored novelty. She was merely another aspect of his life he felt entitled to control. A quiet satisfaction, not of vengeance, but of observed cosmic balance, settled within me. I didn't wish them ill, not actively. My focus was on my own happiness, my own flourishing family, but seeing the natural consequences of their choices unfold, without my intervention, brought a profound sense of peace. Karma, it seemed, was not a swift dramatic act, but a slow, persistent erosion. It worked patiently, meticulously, chipping away at the foundations of deceit, until what was built on sand eventually, inevitably, collapsed. I had once believed that my revenge needed to be earned, fought for, seized. Now, I understood that the greatest retribution was simply to live well, to find joy, and to watch from a safe, happy distance as the universe corrected itself. The world of Garrett and Phoebe, once a source of searing pain, was receding into a blurry backdrop, a distant, fading memory, as my own vibrant, authentic life bloomed in full color. I had built my ark, weathered the storm, and was now sailing on calmer, happier seas, leaving the wreckage in my wake. The best revenge, after all, was truly living my best life. And I was, my quiet joy, a tapestry woven from Russell's enduring love, Leo's burgeoning adolescence, and the steady hum of my thriving pottery studio, had deepened over the past decade. 10 years. It was a lifetime and a blink. Leo was now 18, a thoughtful young man on the cusp of college, his easy affection, a constant balm to my soul. Russell and I had built a home filled with laughter, mutual respect, and a profound, quiet understanding. My pottery had blossomed into a successful business, a tangible symbol of my resilience, my hands shaping beauty from raw earth, much like I had reshaped my own life. The shadows of Garrett and Phoebe had long receded into a distant, almost abstract memory, their whispers of karma now just faint echoes on the wind. I was content, truly, deeply content. Then, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but the area code was ours, so I answered. "Hello, Mom?" The voice was hesitant, yet instantly recognizable. "Audrey, my daughter." My heart lurched, a mixture of exhilaration and dread. We hadn't spoken in years, not beyond the occasional strained text message on birthdays, mediated through Spencer. "Audrey," I breathed, my voice thick with emotion I hadn't realized was still so close to the surface. It's been a long time." "I know," she said, her voice small. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken years. "Mom, I'm getting married." A rush of warmth, pure maternal joy, flooded through me. "Oh, Audrey, that's wonderful. Congratulations. Who's the lucky man?" I pictured her, radiant in white, and for a fleeting moment, the years of pain vanished. "Mitchell," she said, a faint smile evident in her tone. "He's great. And I want you to be there, Mom. At the wedding." The words were a lifeline, a glimmer of the reconciliation I had quietly yearned for. "Of course, sweetheart. Nothing would make me happier." Another pause. This one, I instinctively knew, was fraught. "But there are some things," Some arrangements. Dad and Phoebe are hosting, and Dad's gonna walk me down the aisle, of course. Well, he's my father, and Phoebe has been like a mother to me all these years. The words tumbled out, rushed and slightly breathless, as if she were reciting a script. So, you can come. But I need you to be okay with them being there, and them having the main roles. I don't want any drama. It's my day, you know. And they've done so much for me. The warmth in my chest curdled into a cold knot of familiar pain. It was a punch to the gut. Perfectly aimed. Just when I thought the battle scars had faded. Asterisk. They've been like a mother to me. Asterisk. The casual cruelty of it, delivered with the same saccharine sweetness that Phoebe herself often employed, twisted the knife. She wasn't inviting me back into her life. She was inviting me to play a bit part. A quiet, grateful guest in the spectacle orchestrated by the very people who had shattered my world. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a veiled demand for me to condone their betrayal. To shrink myself into a convenient background figure for her perfect day. My breath hitched. My hard-won peace, my boundaries, my self-worth. All of it suddenly felt under siege. The old Beverly, the one who would have sacrificed anything for her children's approval, would have crumbled, would have agreed to anything just to be close to her daughter. But that woman was long gone, meticulously rebuilt from the ground up. Audrey, I said, my voice shaking slightly, but holding steady. I love you, and I want to be at your wedding more than anything, but I cannot, and will not, be a guest at an event where I am expected to erase my own pain, or to tacitly endorse the people who inflicted it. I cannot stand by while your father and Phoebe play the role of the loving, united parents, knowing the truth of how they got there. That's not a compromise, sweetheart. That's a demand for me to sacrifice my dignity. Silence. A long, agonizing silence. I could hear her breathing, shallow and fast. Mom, please, she finally whispered, a hint of desperation in her voice. It's just for one day. Can't you just, for times me asterisk? For you, Audrey, I have rebuilt my entire life from ashes. For you, I have carried a broken heart for a decade. But I cannot do this. I will not pretend that what they did was okay. My love for you is unconditional. But my presence at that wedding, under those conditions, would be a betrayal of myself, and I won't do it. The words felt heavy, each one a stone chipped from my soul. But they were true. They were times mine asterisk. Another silence. Colder this time. So, you're not coming. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, laced with a familiar, inherited bitterness. I won't be coming if it means diminishing myself and my truth, I clarified, my voice now firm. If you ever decide you want to truly reconcile with times me asterisk, not with a version of me that fits into their narrative, I'll be here. My door is always open, but I won't be a prop in their play. The line went dead. She had hung up. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone's monotonous hum. The silence in the house, once a comfort, was now a cavern, echoing with the sharp, final click of the call ending. My hands trembled as I lowered the phone, placing it gently on the table. A fresh wave of tears, hot and stinging, welled in my eyes, blurring the cheerful pottery pieces on the shelf. The pain was exquisite. A sharp, renewed heartbreak that pierced through the layers of peace I had so carefully built. It was a searing reminder that while I had healed, the chasm between me and my children remained. Still deep, still raw. I had chosen myself, my dignity, my truth, and the cost was another decade of separation from my daughter. It was a choice I knew, in the deepest part of my soul, was right. But God, it hurt. It hurt with an intensity that threatened to unravel the very tapestry of my hard-won contentment. My beautiful, brilliant daughter, still so profoundly lost in the labyrinth of her father's lies. The fight, I realized, was far from over. A profound quiet settled over the house, a heavier silence than before, now layered with the fresh sting of rejection. I stood there, the weight of the phone call pressing down on me, the echoes of Audrey's accusation ringing in my ears. Russell found me minutes later, still staring blankly at the wall, a single tear tracing a path through the dried salt on my cheek. He didn't need words. He simply wrapped me in his strong, steady embrace, a silent anchor in the storm of my renewed grief. Leo, ever perceptive, had likely heard enough to understand the gravity of the situation. He was 18 now, but his wisdom often belied his years, a quiet observer of human nature, honed by his own early experiences. He would sit with us later that evening, his hand resting on my arm, offering a silent comfort that spoke volumes. The next morning, I was still wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, nursing a cup of tea, when I heard Leo's voice from his room, low and serious. He was on the phone. My heart tightened, a premonition settling in my chest. He was talking to Audrey. He never did this. Never intruded on the delicate, fractured relationship I had with my biological children. I strained to hear, but his door was almost closed. The conversation, a muffled murmur. I only caught snippets, enough to know he wasn't yelling, not accusing, but speaking with that calm, deliberate tone he reserved for serious conversations. It wasn't until later that day, when he came to sit beside me, a thoughtful expression on his face, that I knew for sure. "I called Audrey, Mom," he said, his gaze meeting mine, clear and unwavering. I couldn't stand by and watch her keep hurting you. And herself. She doesn't know the truth, not really. Dad, Garrett. He painted a picture for them that wasn't real. He paused, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. I didn't tell her to choose, I just asked her to think. To remember. To wonder why you never talked about what happened. Why you disappeared. Why he always got to be the victim. A wave of gratitude, so powerful it brought fresh tears to my eyes, washed over me. My Leo, my rock, he had planted seeds, not with anger, but with the gentle rain of truth. Audrey's hands trembled as she clutched her phone, the dial tone from her mother's disconnected call, still buzzing faintly in her ears. Her mother hadn't crumbled. She hadn't begged. She had stood firm, a fortress of dignity, leaving Audrey with a hollow ache of rejection and a prickling sensation of unease. Asterisk. A betrayal of myself. Asterisk. Her mother's words echoed. Stark and absolute. What had she asked her mother to betray? A decade of her own carefully constructed narrative, the one Garrett had woven around her and Spencer, began to fray at the edges. Asterisk. Mom is just going through a phase. She's been acting really strange. Aggressive even. Asterisk. Garrett's voice, soothing and rational, had always been the balm to their confusion, the steady hand guiding them away from their unstable mother. Then, the phone rang again. A number she didn't recognize, but the area code was home. "Hello? Audrey, it's Leo." His voice was calm, steady, familiar from the few times they'd spoken over the years, mostly when he'd passed on messages from Russell to Mitchell about a mutual woodworking project. He sounded different now, older. "Leo, hey, how are you?" She managed, her voice tight. She braced herself for an accusation, a lecture on how she'd hurt Beverly. "I'm okay. I heard about your call with Mom," he said, his tone gentle, not judgmental. "Look, Audrey, I'm not calling to tell you what to do. I'm just calling because, well, I care about Mom, and I care about you, and I think there are things you don't know, things your dad omitted." Audrey's stomach clenched. "My dad didn't omit anything. He told us Mom left him, that she went crazy, drained the accounts, and forced him out of the house. She's the one who wanted to tear our family apart." The words were automatic, a rehearsed defense, but even as she spoke them, they sounded hollow, brittle. "Did he tell you why she emptied the accounts?" Leo asked, his voice still even, unwavering. "Did he tell you she consulted a lawyer times before times she moved his stuff out? Did he tell you about the open marriage idea? And that Phoebe was going to move into your family home, while your mom was still living there? The questions hit her like physical blows. An open marriage? Phoebe moving in? Her mind spun, grasping for familiar ground. But the earth beneath her feet was suddenly shifting. Mom is just going through a phase. That phrase, Garrett's casual dismissal, suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. He had never mentioned an open marriage, never mentioned Phoebe's intended residency. He had simply said Beverly was being unreasonable and aggressive. That's not what happened, Audrey stammered. But a tremor of doubt ran through her. A vivid memory flashed. Her mother, pale and thin, sitting silently at the dinner table, while Garrett and Phoebe laughed conspiratorially, their hands brushing under the table. She remembered feeling a vague sense of discomfort, a childish confusion, but her father had always smoothed it over, saying, "Mommy's just tired, sweetie. You know how she gets." Audrey, your mom wouldn't talk about it for years. She was too hurt, too proud. But Russell and I know. And anyone who knew your dad times before times all this knows he's a master manipulator. He's charming, yes. But he's also ruthless. He took everything from your mom. Her home, her money, her reputation. He even got alimony from her, and he turned you and Spencer against her. Leo's voice was firm now, but still laced with genuine concern. He didn't just lose the house, he times it from her. He made sure she walked away with nothing, just like he threatened to do. And Phoebe was right there, basking in it all. A cold dread seeped into Audrey's bones. Alimony? Her mother paid times him asterisk? This contradicted everything she had been told. Another memory, sharp and unwelcome? Her mother packing boxes in the guest room? Her face impassive, almost ghost-like. She had assumed it was her mother being vindictive, throwing her father out. But what if it was her mother times leaving asterisk, asserting herself after an unbearable betrayal? Think about it, Audrey, Leo continued, his voice softening. Your mom rebuilt her entire life from scratch. Alone. She never asked for anything. She never gossiped. Never tried to poison your mind against your dad. She just lived. She built a business. She found love again. A real, honest love. While Garrett, well, you've seen him lately. Is that the face of a man who was wronged? The conversation ended. Not with a resolution, but with a profound, unsettling silence in Audrey's own mind. Leo hadn't demanded, hadn't judged. He had simply laid out facts, asked questions, and held up a mirror to the polished facade of her father's narrative. She spent the rest of the day in a daze. Every conversation with Garrett over the years now replaying in her head, filtered through Leo's words, his comforting reassurances, his casual dismissals of her mother's character, his constant praise for Phoebe's support and understanding during their difficult time. She remembered how quickly Phoebe had moved into their lives, first as a comforting presence, then a permanent fixture, how Garrett had always subtly undermined Beverly, always joked about her sensitivities, her overreactions. A searing wave of guilt and nausea washed over her. She had been blind, willfully blind. Her father, the man she had idolized, the one who walked her mother out of their shared home, was a liar. A cruel, calculating liar. And Phoebe, the woman she had embraced as a stepmother, was not a supportive friend, but a calculating accomplice, a silent viper in their midst. The tears came then, hot and furious, blurring the vision of her perfectly chosen wedding dress hanging in the closet. It wasn't just anger she felt towards Garrett and Phoebe. It was a crushing wave of shame for her own part in it, for believing the lies, for turning her back on the woman who had carried her, nurtured her, loved her unconditionally. The woman who, even now, prioritized her dignity over her desperate plea for reconciliation. Audrey saw it all with horrifying clarity. Not just her mother's pain, but her mother's strength, her unwavering truth, and the depth of her own betrayal. The pristine white of my wedding dress, hanging in the closet, seemed to mock the turmoil raging within me. 2 days had passed since Leo's call. 2 agonizing days where every memory, every conversation with my father, had been replayed, re-examined, and finally, rewritten by the chilling light of truth. The shame was a bitter bile in my throat, a constant companion that choked my excitement for my own wedding. How could I walk down the aisle, a symbol of purity and new beginnings, when I was tainted by years of willful blindness, of rejecting the mother who had loved me unconditionally? My heart felt like a raw, exposed nerve, torn between the ghost of the father I'd adored and the painful reality of the man he truly was. Mitchell, bless his unsuspecting heart, thought my quietness was pre-wedding nerves. He had no idea the earthquake that had rocked the very foundations of my world. The church, a grand edifice of stained glass and polished oak, now felt like a cage. Every beaming smile, every congratulatory whisper, grated on my ears. Garrett, looking resplendent in his tailored suit, stood at the front, his arm around a smirking Phoebe, both radiating the picture of a devoted, successful couple. The irony was a punch to my gut. This was their times narrative, meticulously crafted and flawlessly performed, and I, his daughter, had been the star in his supporting cast. My stomach churned, a mixture of nausea and a burgeoning righteous fury. My mother wasn't here. She had chosen her dignity, and I, in my blindness, had chosen their lie. The weight of that decision now pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. As the organ music swelled, signaling my entrance, a wave of cold dread washed over me. This was it, the moment I would step into the spotlight, on the arm of the man who had systematically destroyed my mother's life, while the woman who had helped him stood proudly beside him. I saw Mitchell at the altar, his eyes shining with love, and a flicker of the joy I was supposed to feel pierced through the gloom. He deserved the truth. I deserved the truth. My mother deserved justice. Garrett offered his arm, his smile practiced, perfect. "Ready, sweetheart?" he whispered, his eyes glinting with a self-satisfied pride. I placed my hand on his arm, my fingers feeling the unfamiliar hardness of his bicep. Every step down the aisle felt like a step into a deeper lie. The faces of our friends, our family, blurred into a sea of expectant smiles. My gaze drifted to Phoebe, who offered a small, knowing smirk, a subtle triumph in her eyes. It was that smirk, that brazen, unrepentant arrogance, that solidified my resolve. We reached the altar. Garrett squeezed my hand, then turned to Mitchell, his voice booming with practiced sincerity. "Take care of my girl, Mitchell. Marriage is a sacred trust. It's about honesty, fidelity, and unwavering commitment. It's about building a life on a foundation of truth and mutual respect." He clapped Mitchell on the shoulder, a proud father delivering a wise benediction. The words, honesty, fidelity, unwavering commitment, echoed in the hallowed space, but to my ears, they were a deafening mockery. A sharp, searing image flashed in my mind. My mother, years ago, pale and heartbroken, silently packing Garrett's clothes into a box in the guest room. The truth, raw and undeniable, exploded in my consciousness. This man, standing here, preaching about sacred trust and truth, was a vile, calculating hypocrite. He hadn't just betrayed my mother. He had systematically lied to us, to everyone, for a decade. My hand flew to Garrett's arm, not a gesture of affection, but a fierce grip that made him flinch. The officiant had just opened his mouth to begin the ceremony. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the expectant hush of the church, surprisingly strong, though it trembled with the force of my emotions. All eyes snapped to me. Garrett's practiced smile faltered. "Audrey, darling?" Phoebe murmured, her voice laced with concern. "A perfect performance. No, this isn't right." I pulled my hand free from Garrett's arm, taking a step back. The rustle of my dress was loud in the sudden, stunned silence. Mitchell looked at me, bewildered. "Audrey, what are you doing?" Garrett hissed, his eyes narrowed, the charming facade cracking. I ignored him. turning to face the bewildered congregation, my gaze sweeping over their faces, searching for any glimmer of understanding. "My father," I began, my voice clear now, trembling no longer, just spoke about honesty and fidelity. He just spoke about sacred trust and a foundation of truth. How ironic. I felt the heat of his anger radiating off him, but I pushed past it. 10 years ago, he didn't uphold any of those vows. He proposed an open marriage to my mother, right after telling her that Phoebe— I pointed a shaking finger at my stepsister, who gasped, her face draining of color— would be moving into our family home, as his mistress. Gasps rippled through the church. A furious murmur erupted. Garrett's face was a mask of purple rage, his jaw clenched. Phoebe looked like she wanted to disappear into the polished floorboards. He didn't just ask for a divorce. I continued, my voice gaining power, fueled by a decade of suppressed truth. He threatened my mother, tried to strip her of everything. He stole her home, her money, her reputation. He even forced her to pay times him times alimony, and he manipulated Spencer and me into believing she was unstable, that she had abandoned us, when all she did was refuse to be degraded by his betrayal. Tears streamed down my face now, but they were tears of fury, not sorrow. He is a liar, a cheat, and Phoebe— I turned my full gaze on her. You were not a supportive friend or a second mother. You were his accomplice. You knowingly helped him destroy my mother's life and her family, and you reveled in her pain. Chaos erupted. People were whispering, pointing. My grandmother, Garrett's mother, let out a piercing shriek. Garrett lunged towards me, his hand reaching for my arm, his eyes blazing with a dangerous fury. Audrey, that is enough. You are being hysterical. But I was beyond his control. My eyes met Mitchell's, who stood, stunned, at the altar. I'm so sorry, Mitchell, I whispered, my voice breaking. I can't do this. Not like this. Not with these lies, this foundation of deceit. I turned, my white dress a defiant banner, and ran. I pushed through the stunned guests, ignoring their shouts, their bewildered faces. I could hear Garrett roaring my name, Phoebe's frantic cries. But I kept running, past the manicured gardens, past the limousines, out into the glorious, liberating sunshine. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a newfound freedom, a fierce, exhilarating surge of truth. My feet carried me towards the car, the one I had driven here, the one I would drive far, far away from this shattered illusion. There was only one place I needed to go, one person I needed to find. My mother. The phone, cradled gently on the table, felt like a silent judgment, its quiet presence amplifying the ache in my chest. Audrey's refusal, her inherited bitterness, had left a raw, open wound, even as I stood by my truth. Russell, ever the stoic anchor, had held me through the initial storm, and Leo, my quiet champion, had planted his seeds of doubt, with an unwavering conviction I could only marvel at. I tried to focus on the soft, yielding clay on my wheel, the rhythmic spin of familiar comfort, but my hands felt heavy, my mind still replaying Audrey's clipped voice. It was mid-afternoon, the sun high and bright, when a frantic pounding erupted from the front door. Not a polite knock, but a desperate, insistent drumming that vibrated through the floorboards. Russell, who had been sanding a piece of wood in his workshop, emerged, his brow furrowed. Leo, curled up with a book on the sofa, looked up, a question in his eyes. Before Russell could reach it, the door burst open, and there she was. Audrey, my daughter, still in her wedding dress, its pristine white now smudged with dirt at the hem, her veil askew, her face streaked with tears and smeared makeup, her eyes wide and bloodshot fixed on mine, a raw agony visible in their depths. Behind her, a few paces back, stood Mitchell, his own expression a mixture of shock and bewildered concern. "Mom!" she choked out, her voice a ragged whisper, a gasp for air. "Mom, I—" Her legs seemed to give way, and she sagged against the doorframe, a tremor running through her entire body. I dropped the clay I was holding, the soft earth thudding onto the floor. My heart leaped into my throat, a dizzying rush of disbelief and recognition. It was really her. Here. Now. I moved without thinking, crossing the small living room in a blur, pulling her into my arms. Her body, stiff with shock and exhaustion, slowly relaxed against me, her hands clutching the fabric of my shirt, as if afraid I would disappear. "Audrey," I murmured, my own voice thick with unshed tears, burying my face in her hair, inhaling the faint scent of bridal perfume mixed with something wilder, something desperate. "Oh, sweetheart, my brave, beautiful girl." She wept then, great, shuddering sobs that shook us both. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she wailed, her words muffled against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I was so blind." He lied. He lied about everything. Leo made me see. At the altar, when he talked about fidelity, it all just exploded. I saw it. All of it. I held her tighter, stroking her hair, letting her tears soak into my dress. "It's okay, darling. It's okay. You're here, that's all that matters." Russell, with quiet grace, had stepped forward to greet Mitchell, offering a handshake and a reassuring smile. Leo, ever observant, stood a respectful distance, his eyes filled with a quiet satisfaction as he watched his half-sister finally find her way home. Mitchell, pale but steady, stepped closer. "Beverly, I can't apologize enough for my part in this. I had no idea. Audrey told me everything. I'm just so sorry for what you went through." I smiled faintly, releasing Audrey for a moment to meet his gaze. "You couldn't have known, Mitchell. Garrett is a master of illusion." I squeezed his hand, recognizing the genuine remorse and steady support in his eyes. He was a good man, worthy of my daughter's love. Over the next few hours, Audrey, still occasionally shaken by fresh waves of tears, recounted the entire painful saga. Leo's insightful questions, the dawning horror as she re-examined her childhood memories, and the final, explosive realization at the altar. She spoke of the chaos, the stunned silence, Garrett's livid rage, and Phoebe's mortified expression, and then, her escape. A desperate flight to the one place she knew she would find unconditional love and truth. We talked late into the night, Russell and Leo listening patiently, offering quiet comfort. It was a raw, cathartic unburdening, a decade of lies finally stripped away. The next morning, as Audrey, having finally found some peace, slept deeply in Leo's vacated room, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was Spencer, my son. His voice, when I answered, was hesitant, thick with emotion. "Mom, it's Spencer." "Spencer, darling," I replied, my voice catching. "Another one." My heart swelled with a cautious hope. I heard what happened at Audrey's wedding," he began, his voice tight. "She called me, said some things, and then I heard it on the news. Garrett, he's being called a fraud. And Mom, I found some old legal papers in his study, things I shouldn't have seen. The alimony, the house, everything. I can't believe I didn't see it." He paused, a ragged sigh escaping him. "He told me you left him for another man, that you were just trying to ruin him. He twisted everything. I'm so sorry, Mom. For everything. For not believing you. For letting him poison me against you." My eyes welled up again, but this time, they were tears of profound relief. "Oh, Spencer. It's okay. It's truly okay. I understand." He was very convincing. "No, it's not okay," he insisted, his voice cracking. "I should have known. I should have seen through him. I want to come home, Mom. I want to talk. I want to apologize in person." "My door is always open, sweetheart," I said, a warmth spreading through my chest that finally began to fill the decade-long void. "Always." Over the next few weeks, The public fallout from Audrey's dramatic wedding day confession was swift and merciless. Garrett's carefully constructed empire began to crumble under the weight of its own deceit. News channels, initially treating it as a juicy society scandal, quickly delved deeper, unearthing the financial irregularities and shady dealings that had been hinted at for years. His business partners abandoned him, terrified of the public relations nightmare. Investors demanded their money back, triggering lawsuits. The pristine image of the respected businessman, the pillar of the community, shattered into a million pieces. Our old house, the one he had fought so ruthlessly to keep, was quietly put on the market, a desperate attempt to mitigate his rapidly accumulating debts. Phoebe, too, suffered her own public humiliation. Her social media, once a curated stream of glamorous couple photos, went silent. Whispers circulated about bitter arguments between her and Garrett, her lavish spending habits, now a source of contention rather than adoration. The open marriage detail, the mistress living in the family home, became tabloid fodder, destroying any semblance of respectability she had clung to. She was no longer the triumphant other woman, she was a casualty. Her own dreams of a gilded life with Garrett turning to ash. I heard it all from Spencer and Audrey, who, having been freed from their father's manipulative grip, now relayed the news with a mixture of grim satisfaction and lingering sadness. They weren't reveling in his downfall, but rather processing the painful truth of who their father truly was. My children were back. My family was healing. The universe, it seemed, was indeed correcting itself. And I, Beverly, was finally able to breathe freely, truly at peace for the first time in a very long time. The year that followed Audrey's dramatic revelation was one of slow, deliberate rebuilding, not just for my daughter and Spencer, but for all of us. The rawness of the wounds faded, replaced by the gentle balm of understanding and reconnection. We spent countless hours talking, crying, and, most importantly, laughing. Mitchell proved to be every bit the steadfast, loving man Audrey deserved, standing by her side through the public scandal and her own emotional turmoil. 12 months later, the memory of the first chaotic wedding was a distant nightmare. Audrey and Mitchell decided to renew their vows in a small, intimate ceremony in Mitchell's parents' sprawling backyard, under a canopy of flowering vines. It was a day bathed in gentle sunlight and genuine joy, every face radiating warmth and happiness. There were no grand pronouncements, no carefully choreographed performances, just honest love, renewed vows, and a profound sense of family. And as the gentle chords of a string quartet filled the air, I walked Audrey down the aisle. Her hand, no longer trembling with accusation, but firm and warm in mine, was a lifeline of reconnection. Her eyes, bright with unshed tears of happiness, met mine, and in that shared glance, a decade of pain, misunderstanding, and separation simply dissolved. It was the full circle of my journey, a moment of profound, breathtaking peace. My daughter, radiant and free, was finally truly mine again. Russell sat in the front row, a proud smile on his face, Leo beside him, his gaze holding a quiet, knowing satisfaction. Spencer too was there, his arm linked with a new girlfriend, his presence a testament to our repaired bond. We heard, of course, about Garrett. The legal troubles had mounted, his business reputation irrevocably shattered. Lawsuits, investigations, and a cascade of bad press had driven him into bankruptcy. The grand house, the symbol of his meticulously curated life, had been sold at a loss to cover his mounting debts. Phoebe, I learned through Spencer, had finally realized the hollow victory she'd chased. Their relationship, built on deceit and opportunistic ambition, couldn't withstand the harsh realities of financial ruin and social ostracization. She left him, disappearing as quietly as she'd first arrived in my life, taking only the bitter memory of what she thought she deserved. Garrett was utterly alone, his kingdom reduced to rubble, his once charming smile replaced by a permanent scowl of defeat and regret. As I watched Audrey and Mitchell exchange their vows, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun, a profound sense of serenity settled over me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the exquisite, undeniable truth of living well. My journey had come full circle. I had lost so much, endured unimaginable pain, but in return, I had gained everything that truly mattered. My dignity, my children, a love that was honest and true, and a life built on a foundation of authentic joy. The wounds had healed, leaving behind scars that served not as reminders of pain, but as maps of my resilience. This was justice, pure and unadulterated, not a fiery retribution, but the quiet, undeniable triumph of a life reclaimed, flourishing in the warm embrace of love and truth. The soft glow of fairy lights woven through the vines cast a magical, almost ethereal light upon the faces of my loved ones. Here, amidst the gentle murmur of conversations and the clinking of glasses, was the culmination of a decade of rebuilding, a symphony of resilience that sang in my very bones. Audrey, radiant and laughing with Mitchell, Spencer talking animatedly with Leo, Russell's hand a warm, steady presence at my back. This was my truth, vibrant and undeniable. Each beat of my heart resonated with a profound, unshakable peace that had been hard-won, forged in the fires of betrayal, yet emerged purer and stronger. My gaze, however, momentarily drifted to a figure standing alone at the edge of the garden, cloaked in the shadows cast by a towering oak. Garrett. He hadn't been invited, I was certain. Yet there he was, a specter of his former self, a stark monument to his own ruin. His tailored suit, once a symbol of his arrogant power, now seemed to hang loosely on his frame, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with a defeat far deeper than any financial loss. His eyes, hollow and distant, scanned the joyous scene, never quite meeting anyone's gaze, a pariah in the very world he once sought to dominate. There was no anger left in me for him, no burning desire for his suffering, only a quiet, almost detached observation of a life truly lived, and one utterly, irrevocably lost. A gentle nudge from Russell reminded me I wasn't alone in noticing him. He squeezed my hand, a silent affirmation of my peace. Taking a deep breath, I excused myself, feeling an unexpected resolve to close this chapter. Not with animosity, but with clarity. I walked towards him, the rustle of my dress cutting through the quiet hum of the party. He saw me approaching, and a flicker of something, fear, shame, crossed his features before settling into a familiar, resentful defiance. "Beverly," he rasped, his voice rough, devoid of its old charm. "So, you won. Congratulations." The bitterness clung to his words like a shroud. I met his gaze, unflinching. "This isn't a victory, Garrett," I said softly, truthfully. "It's simply life, the consequences of choices, yours and mine. I chose truth. I chose dignity. And I chose to build something real, something honest." I gestured subtly towards the laughing groups, to Audrey, to Russell and Leo. "This is what that looks like." He followed my gaze, a deep sigh escaping him. I lost everything," he muttered, almost to himself. "Everything. You lost what wasn't real," I corrected gently. "What you built on lies. What you valued above integrity. What you valued above the people who truly loved you." I paused, a wave of genuine pity, not triumph, washing over me. "I hope you find peace, Garrett. True peace. Not the kind you tried to buy, but the kind you earned through honesty." I turned to leave, leaving him standing in the shadows, a monument to a past that no longer held any power over me. Returning to the warmth of my family, I felt a lightness I hadn't thought possible. The encounter wasn't about closure for him, but for me. I had looked into the eyes of the man who tried to destroy me, and found nothing but the quiet assurance of my own resilience, my own flourishing. The best revenge, I had discovered, wasn't in wishing him ill, but in living a life so profoundly, authentically joyful, that his actions held no power to diminish it. It was in the feel of Russell's hand in mine, the proud gleam in Leo's eyes, the knowing smile Audrey gave me across the room. It was in the quiet hum of my pottery wheel, the earthy scent of clay, the vibrant colors of my garden. It was in the knowledge that I had chosen love over bitterness, forgiveness over resentment, and self-worth over external validation. My heart, once shattered, was now whole, not in spite of the cracks, but because of them, each one a testament to the strength that had brought me here. My life was not just good. It was extraordinary, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to heal, to love, and to find its own radiant truth, come what may. Later that evening, as I swayed gently in Mitchell's arms, the music soft around us, my gaze found my mother's. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a genuine, unburdened laugh I hadn't heard in so many years, maybe ever. I saw the lines of resilience etched around her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture. Leo had opened my eyes, but it was her time's unwavering truth, asterisk her time's silent suffering, asterisk her time's refusal to compromise her dignity, that had truly saved me from a lie, from a hollow life, from the shadow of a man who preyed on loyalty. The warmth of her smile, the easy grace with which she moved through this new life she had built, was more than just beauty, it was a beacon. She wasn't just my mother. She was my guiding star, the living proof that even after the deepest betrayals, a life could be reborn, more beautiful, more authentic than before. And for that, for her quiet strength and her boundless capacity to love even after all I had done, my heart would forever be filled with a gratitude so immense it defied words.